Hello, and welcome back to the Book Marketing Tips and Author Success Podcast. This is Penny Sansevieri and Amy Cornell. And I want to just give a shout out really quickly to listeners who have been writing and talking about how much they love the show, how much they're a big fan of the show. And we are just so honored to present this to you for our fourth year. I can't believe we've been doing this for 4 years, but I'm so excited. So yeah, we love getting your notes. We love getting your show feedback, so do not hesitate to reach out to us. Now, today's show is really based on a coaching call that I did with an author who was getting really kind of discouraged. And we wanted to put together a show, not just to motivate you to keep going, but to help you understand that if you're feeling discouraged, there may be more to this story than, oh my gosh, I'm just not selling books. And a lot of times authors want to throw their hands up in the air and give up, which was the case with this author that I did a coaching call with. And instead, what we did on this call, which inspired this podcast, was we just spent some time going through a checklist. Have you done this? Have you done this? Have you done that? And a lot of times I think we're so close to our own stuff that we don't really, we've like, oh, like when I was having this conversation with this author, we're like, oh my gosh, I hadn't thought of that. And I hadn't thought of that. And that's really what the impetus of the show is about. And Amy, you and I talked about this as well as we were kind of plotting out this show, about how a lot of times authors just don't see all the things, right?
Yeah, and a lot of time on my end, when I start, it's with clients who are very much, they've given sales benchmarks to kind of gauge whether or not people like their work, if it's worth their time. Like, if we're being honest, a lot of authors do that. We get it. You didn't write this book to just sit out in the universe. You want people to buy it. But when you put your value into very specific sales numbers at very specific time benchmarks, it's an easy way to get discouraged. And you forget about the things that aren't being done that actually may help move the needle. It's not like one of these things is going to sell you a ton of books, but there could easily be some things missing or that have been overlooked that will kind of fill in those holes that do convert more shoppers to buyers more consistently as well. And It really does make a difference. All these details matter.
Well, and to your point, Amy, the successful authors are the ones who really do pay attention to the details. I mean, that's always it. They are looking at all of the things. And so that's why we wanted to bring this show to you. And I think the first thing to talk about is the price of your book. So it has to match your market. I don't know that I can say a lot more about that. We have, by the way, just as an aside, we pretty much have shows. I'm looking down this list of our checklist. We pretty much have shows on all of these topics. So if you go down this checklist with us during this podcast, you're like, oh my gosh, I should pay attention to this. There's a show for that, right? So we're not going to list them all in the show notes of this particular episode, but you'll be able to go back through and give those a listen if you want to zero in on something like pricing of your book. It has to match your market. Don't overprice your book. I can't emphasize this enough. I know we've talked about this before. Books that are priced, excessively high are one of two things. So it's the author wanting to recoup all of their expenses related to producing the book, or it's the publisher and the author has no control over it. But typically, excessively high books, they're just a problem from the get-go. But it doesn't necessarily have to be something where your book is priced at $65, which we've seen. Your book just has to match, the book price should match the market. So if you're looking at where your, are the ebooks $9.99? Are they $7.99? Are they $12.99? And then I think in terms of the other piece of the pricing is you also have to look at your own career. So somebody who's charging $15.95 for an ebook who has, many other very successful titles. Like, for example, I'm reading the Housemates series, which is fabulous. And I've been bugging Amy to get started on these books because they're just so good. I want to say that her ebook is like 1995 or something. She has,
Whoa.
well, she has like a 500,000 reviews on Amazon for the first book. And so you can charge $20 for an ebook. It may not be that high, but it's somewhere north of $15 for sure. I think you also have to look at that. If you're the first time author, then your book price, I'm not telling you to underprice your book, and I'm not telling you to make it free or make it $1 or something, because those days are gone. But I am saying is price your book strategically for both the market as well as your career.
Yeah, I think absolutely, that makes so much sense. And I'm glad you mentioned where you're at in your career, Penny, too, because I think that's a lot of that doesn't get considered often enough. Where, because we tell authors do some competitive analysis, go check out the bestseller list. How much are people paying for, you know what I mean? Find a happy medium. And don't say just because, well, look, the top end people are charging X, so I want to charge X and get in on that. That's not how that works.
Right,
For
exactly.
sure. Next one is the cover. I mean, this is something that, and Penny and I say it behind the scenes all the time. Like, do we talk about covers too much? And then, of course, I typically kind of jokingly say, like, well, if every cover we saw was amazing, then we'd shut up about it, right? Like,
Right, exactly.
but truly, covers matter. Like Penny said, we have had so many shows on covers, so we don't need to go into all of the details why, but it really is so important. There's no such thing as good enough. And we were talking the other day about covers, Penny, specifically, and I know we discussed the fact that, like, in some genres, it's even more critical than others, and you'll stand out like a sore thumb if your book cover is not exceptional. Like, I always think of historical fiction. I mean, some of those covers are like artwork. They are so flippin' good.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And so you really can't, and we've talked about this too, it's easy to get hung up on, I love this concept. It was in my head already. And it's kind of like naming your baby before it's born. Sometimes it just doesn't make sense once you see it. But if you have a concept for a cover look and it just doesn't fit, you got to let it go. And that's where consulting, hiring a cover designer that has a really solid portfolio in the genre you're trying to compete in makes a lot of sense, because they do this for a reason and they know what works and trust their recommendations.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And we're going to do a separate show on this, but also don't hesitate to redo your cover if you launch it and you're like, you're getting negative feedback or the cover doesn't feel quite right. And we're going to do a whole show on because we have an author who has been revising her covers, which to great success, actually. So formats, this is another big thing. Do you have the formats that your audience really wants to read? It's a good question to ask. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that, okay, so audiobooks are super popular, you have to all run out and get your book turned into audio. That's not what I'm saying at all. You want to make sure that you are looking at, as you're going through other books that are similar to yours, what kind of formats are out there. And a lot of times authors forget to do large print, right? So, does your audience, are there lots of large print in your particular market? Maybe that's a format to consider. Ebook for sure. Paperbacks. A lot of times authors get hung up on, I want to have a hardcover because hardcovers feel prestigious, right? But hardcovers don't really sell as much. And I think hardcovers sell well for certain segments, and like, I'm sure for really, really big name authors like the Harry Potter series, lots of hardcovers were sold there. In general, hardcover is, I mean, Amy, when was the last time, I know that you love your Kindle and whatnot, but I mean, other than your children's books, when was the last time that you bought a hardcover for yourself?
You know what? That's really funny, Penny, because as you're talking about this, I'm like looking around in front
Right.
of my desk. And you know what's interesting to your point, though? The ones that I do have within, my eye line were all gifted to me. If
Yes.
they weren't, I don't actually buy my own hardcovers. So to your point about being more prestigious, I think that's kind of the same vibe that like if somebody's looking to gift a certain type of book, they might lean more toward a hardcover, but it's not going to be the majority of the purchases by any means.
Right. Right. Exactly. So I think that you have to um, really figure out what the formats are. And I know it's easy to say, well, I'm just going to do all of them. And that's fine. I mean, if you have that kind of if you have that much enough money to put out an audiobook right away, that's great. But does your audience really read an audiobook? Right? So like my audiobooks, because they have so many screenshots in them and images and graphics and things like that, those are really tough to put in audiobook because can you imagine the narrator? All right, so now we have a picture of, I mean, how boring would that be? But I think that if you have, uh, I mean, could you imagine, right?
No, it's like listening to the Dateline podcast when they're talking about a clip or what somebody looks like. It's like, damn it. Like
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. So anyway, yeah, I mean, I think formats are, you gotta make sure that you've got all the right ones.
Absolutely. And then reviews. This is a huge one. And I've actually had this conversation with a few clients lately. So it's definitely something that a lot of authors don't think about soon enough in their book's life. So reviews, they don't magically happen. I'm probably not telling anybody listening something they don't know, but they really are so important for converting shoppers to buyers and for looking like a sure thing to media influencers, things like that. So if you always, and this is something that a lot of authors don't realize that they need to do right away, is tap into your own networks. Make sure from day one you are reminding people how important getting reviews is, how much it means to you, you appreciate their support, all those kind of things. They really need to happen from the day your book is born. You need to be hustling for reviews. You can't wait. It's not the field of dreams, and so many well-meaning people. I always leave reviews for books because obviously it's top of mind for me, but I know a lot of people that read, that are pretty, they're super readers that I'm always bugging them. Like, have you left reviews lately? And they go, oh shoot, no, but I need to. You're right. You're right. You're right. So they love books. They read a lot of books and they just get busy, and I think it's hard for people to really understand how much it means to the author. And if you aren't getting reviews and your book's been out a little while, and especially if you're spending your time on marketing, effort on marketing and promotion, you have to ask yourself why.
Yeah.
What is not happening that is not, you know what I mean, that's potentially preventing you from getting reviews. And a lot of the things on this checklist could be part of it, the amount of outreach you're doing, things like that. But yeah, there's a reason. And, Penny, you and I, it always says something to us too, when an author reaches out to us and the book's been out for 6 months or more and no reviews. I always ask them, I let them know right away, like, what's going on with the reviews? Have you been working on reviews? Have you had any feedback? A lot of times I will ask that hard question, because I want to know what's going on here.
Yeah. Yeah. Because, something that when I teach a class and I talk to authors, and I always tell them that success leaves clues. So typically when I say that, I'm referencing, looking at what other similar authors in your genre are doing, just in terms of getting some inspiration about what you can do. But it's also true from the perspective of trying to figure out what's wrong. So, Amy, as you said, if you're not getting reviews, or if the 5 reviews that you have on Amazon are from your relatives, then you got to kind of figure out, what am I doing wrong? And be willing to take constructive feedback about what you're doing wrong. I think that the description is your book description. And, it's interesting because we talk a lot about the importance of the Amazon retail page, but your book description We've done entire shows on this topic. I don't know that authors spend enough time really figuring out if the description actually speaks to their market. So there's a difference between writing a book description about your book and writing a book description that appeals to your market, right? And an example I give of this is when I talk about elevator pitches. Now, elevator pitches are not, I mean, elevator pitches are oftentimes used in book descriptions, and they're used like the first two lines of a book description. But if you look at like the elevator pitch for Outlander, for example, right? The elevator pitch for Outlander, and now I'm saying this and I don't necessarily know it verbatim, even though I've used this a ton as an example. A woman from 1945 gets thrown back into 1736, whatever it was, right? If you've ever seen Outlander or you've heard Outlander, you know that the romance part of this story is cornerstone to everything, right? It's the reason that she stays there. It is but there's no mention of the romance in this elevator pitch. The reason for that is because they knew that the audience that would read the book, right, your reader, historical fiction does not care about the romance. That's very secondary to them. They love the history. They love all the details, right? That's what, Dinah Gabaldon is known for. She's known for all this research. So that's what I mean when I say your description it's not what the book is about. It is a description that appeals to the readers. And I think get a second and third opinion, run it through ChatGPT, see if it sparks some new ideas, because your book description absolutely can make or break your book, for sure.
Yep, 100%. I think, right. Yeah. I mean, cover and the description kind of go hand in hand these days, in terms of in those first few seconds that somebody has their first impression with your book, they will know between the cover and the description, whether or not they're going to spend money.
Yeah.
And chances of getting them back are very slim, unfortunately, too. Not to add a dark element to this, but that's the reality. So again, these are things that just, you can't be good enough. It needs to be amazing, excellent, insert your, you know what I mean? Same thing with the author bio. I think this is something else that that continues to be overlooked. I'm still shocked, Penny, at how many authors reach out to us that don't have their photo or their bio on their book page. It seems like one of those no-brainers nowadays, but clearly not. Photo, really important. Don't be a gray box. I mean, even if you don't want to use a headshot for a number of reasons, something else that is appropriate for the topic, your brand, you know what I mean? Put something in there that shows that it's intentional, and make sure that your bio actually reflects your genre and what your readers would find interesting or important. So often I also see this is that authors will just default to giving kind of a mini resume, Penny, but they write in a cozy mystery. It's like, nobody cares where you went to college. You know what I mean? Give me a break. They want to see something like cute, fun, interesting. Like, they'd rather know your cat's name than know where you went to school. Like, let's be realistic about the vibe. It totally matters. Yeah. So be very intentional with your bio and, okay, who are my readers? Why do they read in this genre? What would they find fun, interesting, unique, clever? You know what I mean? Get really creative with it. And if you write nonfiction, that's a lot more appropriate for listing your credentials and things like that. But I also see a lot of nonfiction authors kind of go overboard with their bios in listing every single thing they've done since they started walking and talking. And it's like, okay, let's keep it focused on the most, you know what I mean? The topic at hand.
Yeah.
There's always other places where you can go into, we talk about this a lot. There are so many different elements of Author Central and different fields you can utilize for different reasons, where you can go into more detail about your history, your background, your motivation for writing the book, your genre. I mean, really the possibilities are endless, but keep the bio really on point and keep it sharp and interesting, and don't bore people. This is another one of those big selling points. People want to feel a connection with the person, that wrote this book, like whether it's intellectually, emotionally, psychologically, you know what I mean? Like it's part of one of those psychological elements of how people buy and consume and shop. And your bio is absolutely a big selling point that you should not forget to take advantage of.
Yeah. Yeah. I completely agree with that. Keywords, categories, Amazon ads. We have a ton of shows on this, so definitely. And I also have a book on the topic. Sorry, not to be all pluggy about my book, but I think that you really have to be thoughtful and strategic about your book discovery. And a lot of times when we upload our books to Amazon, at that point, we're kind of done with the whole process. And believe me, I get it. I am in this, I'm also an author, so I'm in the same boat. But that is really a good opportunity to kind of dig in and make sure that you have the right categories, the right keywords, and that you are, and that you're also, being strategic about your Amazon ads. So not just throwing a bunch of stuff out there. And like I said, we have a bunch of shows on this topic, so I won't necessarily spend a lot of time on it. But I think that's something that that's part of the checklist, and definitely something that you should also look at.
Right, Penny. And I think it's worth mentioning too that so much with Amazon is not set it and forget it forever.
True.
A lot of these things are very fluid and they should be reviewed a few times a year at minimum.
Yeah.
Keywords are quite literally a mirror of shopper behavior. That changes. It can change seasonally for so many different reasons. So keywords can be changed. Like, this isn't to stress everybody out. You definitely don't get in there every month and change up all your keywords, like by any means. But the keywords, to your point, Penny, when you finally got to the point where you were uploading your book and you were ready to throw your computer out the window, what you chose at that time, same thing with categories, they may not be the most appropriate anymore. They may not be working for you. So just get in the mindset that these are things you need to revisit. And ads, definitely. I mean, again, we don't need to go into it, but that's definitely not a set it and forget it strategy either.
Yeah, for sure.
Your website, we talked about this on a recent show, but you have to have one. I'm sorry to be the bad guy now. But there are simple versions. They're really easy now. It doesn't have to be overly complex. It could be a one pager even. And, what we talk about a lot is that it just shows that you take yourself seriously, that you put in the time and effort to actually create a platform and a brand, even on a very basic level for your potential readers, buyers to engage with you. And once you have one, please keep it current. Keep it current, keep it interesting, similar to your bio, keep it on point. Don't just fill it with a bunch of words because you're like, I have a website now, I have to fill it with a bunch of stuff. Be very intentional and thoughtful with it. But the current one is big. And this is something that I will call out with authors when they reach out to us. And I will let them know, I checked out your website. You need to update this page. Like I 100% will tell people, they'll be coming to us for a book that's been out for 6 months and their website still says it's upcoming. It's like, okay, these are pretty obvious updates that need to be made. So similar to your Amazon, don't set it and forget it. Your website's the same thing. Have one, have a basic one, set reminders to make sure that it stays up to date and interesting. So it's not just a flat time capsule of when you first decided to pay attention to your website.
Right, exactly. And that, and again, we talk about details, Amy, to your point, the details of paying attention to release dates on your website and things like, oh, well, this book was out 6 months ago, or this book was out even a year ago. Those are the things, those are the things that can turn off readers, right? So, because readers pay attention. And part of the reason why we're talking about this is not just because we want you to go down this. Yes, we absolutely want you to go down this list and make sure that all of this stuff, is rocking for you. But the other piece of this too is that the details matter to the readers for sure, as does communicating with readers, which is, blogging or your YouTube channel or something like that. I know that there's so much other fun and sexy stuff that you can be doing other than blogging. Like, I completely get it. But um, it is a great way to communicate with your reader. It's a great way to kind of open the kimono and show them into your world. Um, maybe it, and if you've written fiction, I realize that this gets to be a little bit tougher, but if you've written fiction, you can write, a lot of times you can do you can write about your process as well as, things that you have coming up or your life, to the degree that you're comfortable sharing that. But I've had authors that will actually explore little mini stories on their blog. So they wrote, we had this one author who wrote a detective series. And so he kept giving the detective different things to solve in his blog. And I want to say that he blogged like once a month or something. So it doesn't have to be really overkill. You may also have a YouTube channel. That's great too, if you're comfortable and you're wanting to do video. But it's a great way. It is a great way to stay in communication with your reader, for sure.
Yep. And to go right along with that, newsletter, we've talked about newsletters before. I feel like that is also one of those, everybody listening is kind of cringing, like, oh, they're talking about newsletters again.
Right. I know
we
it.
realize they can be a big undertaking. They can also be, it can be tough to get them going in terms of building your email list and things like that. Because yes, I guess if you want to give yourself a hard time, it's like, well, I only have 10 people on my list. Like, what is the point? But those 10 people could be your super fans if you're consistent with your newsletter and you send them interesting, useful, thoughtful, funny information. Just make sure, again, we did an episode on your reader profile. That's super helpful. Just understand what your readers are into and try to cater to that. You know what I mean? The newsletter is another one of those. Just make those connections and be more than just the person that wrote this book. Be somebody that resonates with them, that they can relate to. And again, if you do anything nonfiction, your newsletter is really such a great way to show that you are more than just a book. But also for fiction too, like Penny said, world building, kind of giving people like little tidbits of insider information. The newsletter is great for that as well. It just pulls people into your brand more. It's just that another touch. We talk about how many impressions you need to like really convert somebody into a fan, and it requires lots of touches, and doing it through only one channel oftentimes is not going to work. You need to connect with them in multiple ways, and a newsletter is just one of those ways. And it sits in their inbox, believe it or not. Like, I can't tell you how many different things I go back to in my inbox, Penny, so many times. So it's also something that lasts longer, than social moves so fast. Social media can be an amazing way to connect with people, but that's what makes it challenging sometimes, is that it's very fast moving, whereas your newsletter is something that they can sit with for a little bit, or that they can come back to when they have a free moment. You know what I mean? So it's a great balance to some of these other really fast-paced marketing strategies that can sometimes feel hard to keep up with.
Well, it is a great, and the other thing though too is that a number of years ago, Goodreads did a study and found that the number one thing that readers want to do at the end of a book is to engage with the author. So having a newsletter, having a place for them to, subscribe and get to know you and things like that, I highly, highly recommend it. We've had our newsletter ever since I've been in business, and we'd never be without it. It is work, but you have to kind of figure out, like, we do our newsletter once a month. We used to do it weekly, which just sounds crazy to me now, but we do it once a month, and it helps to stay in touch with people. Social media. The next one is social media. I mean, I think that, social media is such a for a lot of authors, it could be kind of an albatross, right? It's like, oh my gosh, I know I have to be on social, but I don't feel like I'm, really getting anywhere with social. I think when it comes to social, obviously less is more. And one of the most popular classes that I teach is how to market your book without social media, because a lot of authors feel like they're not really getting anywhere with social. And part of the reason for that is because you don't really know you don't really know what drives your reader, which when you're first marketing your book, I can completely understand that. But if this is your fifth or your sixth book, you should absolutely know, you should have some kind of a plan. So I think find one outlet on social media that you feel resonates best with your market, whether that's X or whether that's Instagram or whether that's Facebook, whatever it is. And then create a strategy, create a, make a plan for the different, maybe you have theme days, right? Maybe Monday is something and Thursday is like, typically is like Throwback Thursday. Um, and then create, as you start to create themes around various days, your audience will come to expect that, right? So essentially what you're doing is you're training your reader to expect those kinds of things. Part of the issue, I think, with authors on social media, a lot of times anyway, is that they're a little bit scattershot. They want to throw a bunch of stuff out there and see what resonates the most. And that's a really discouraging way to market your book. And the idea again with social media is not to sell books. Social media does not sell books. Social media is brand awareness. It's, raising the awareness of you as an author, your brand, your book, your books. But it's not necessarily to sell books. You want to engage with people so they can learn more about you as readers love connecting with authors. Absolutely.
Yep, that's a really good point, Penny. Social media is definitely a supporting actor. It's not the lead,
Right.
So,
right.
But it can be very critical, again, especially for the right audience. And I love that you mentioned it's not really to sell books, because that is one of the, I hate to say red flags, that sounds really harsh. But when an author, if we do social coaching or whatever, and we check out their page and we notice that every single post is just the book cover and reminding somebody to buy it. It's just tons and tons of images of the book cover over and over again. And it's like, well, okay, we get it. You have a book, like,
yeah, exactly. Exactly.
But it happens a lot when you don't really have a plan and you're not really sure what to do, but you think, okay, I'm on social, so this sucker better sell me some books. So I'm going to slap my book cover up here every day until people start buying it. And realistically, that doesn't work. So,
right.
Have a plan, make connections, be interesting. There's so many accounts I follow just because their content is clever, and it may not have anything to do with what they actually, how they make their money, but it definitely comes back eventually. And a lot of them I actually have engaged with in other ways versus just liking their social posts. But I follow them because I think they're a good use of my nonsense time.
Right. Exactly.
And the last one, influencer and thought leader support. Like, this is something else that surprisingly a lot of authors don't tap into enough, or at least not aggressively enough. Are you getting coverage through channels that already have the attention of your market? That is the big one. Why you want to pitch to influencers, why you want to pitch yourself to thought leaders. These are the people that already have the ear and eyes of the people that you want to buy your book. So getting them to support you in any way, to give you coverage, to give you a mention, there is nothing too little at this point, especially when you're first starting out. Say yes to all the opportunities, especially if they're free or they cost you a book or something like that, or a little bit of your time. But influencer and thought leader support, it's something that is ongoing. And again, I've already said it a lot. I feel like I'm repeating myself, but it also needs to be very thoughtful. Don't just blast a bunch of people via email saying, I have a book out, you're going to love it. But make sure you're working on this kind of networking, because it makes a big difference. It's a lot of authors that come to us, and Penny and I, when we share notes, after you chat with people, you'll say they've done no pitching whatsoever. You know what I mean? That happens a lot when we share notes before we do a proposal for a potential client. And it's always just shocking to me, but it's kind of like reminding people to review the book. It's one of those things that's like, wow, I think a lot of authors genuinely don't think they have to go to that extreme to generate, some traction, but you really do. You have to be fully engaged in all these aspects. and it's even if you hire a team, Penny, like you could hire us, we can do great work. But if you want your book to be successful, if you want to be successful for a very long time, it's not going to be a one and done after 4 to 8 weeks. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like we can help authors kind of, get ahead on a lot of things, build their platforms, get the exposure for a very specific title, things like that. And it's an awesome way to build your brand. But if you're not prepared to be engaged in your own success ongoing, that's only going to take you so far.
Right. That's exactly true. And I think that, that kind of influencer or thought leader outreach, you're really just networking with people who are, approach it in a way where you like a lot of times authors are like, oh, I don't want to sell. I don't really want to sell. I don't like to sell, etc. Like I get it, but approach it differently. Approach it more as a getting to know you, right? You would be amazed at how many times when I've talked to authors like, oh, I reached out to such and such and I was, just wanted to commend them on whatever they're doing, right? Oh my gosh, this was a great, and then suddenly they have made this connection. So you never know where it's going to take you. You really get out of your comfort zone and you really want to just start to network. And the best time to network is before you have anything to sell, which I know sounds crazy, but not showing up book in hand is really it's actually a better door opener. So if you're listening to this, you're like, okay, that's the one thing that I haven't done. Ahead of your next book coming out, make sure to start, get out there and start to network with people and get to know some of these influencers in your market. You might be surprised at what they're willing to do for you. So I hope that this has been helpful. And I hope that it is a checklist that has maybe shown where the holes are in your own marketing and what you could maybe do better. Because obviously we all want you to succeed, or we wouldn't be doing these shows, show after show after show on this, on the topic of book marketing. We'd love your feedback. If you think we missed something, let us know. Let us know if you listen to the show, you're like, oh my gosh, I found 2 or 3 things that I can fix. We'd love to hear that, as well as any show feedback. We want to thank you so much for listening and for your reviews. We love your reviews wherever you listen to podcasts, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.